So good evening, everybody. Welcome to tour number 12 with this July's Tour of Fates. We are privileged to have Imam Hamarani here with us tonight. I always say Huzaifa. So he's with us, and he is going to explain to us the faith of Islam. And he has done this in the past, and he's a wonderful speaker. So I think you will absolutely love to hear what he has to say and how he's put it all together for us tonight. And just again, like we did before, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, and I will go ahead and read them to him. We should have probably a couple more people even coming in. This might be our largest tour that we've had so far. But go ahead, Imam Huzaifa, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Islam. We'd appreciate that.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. My name is Huzaifa. It's a little bit difficult to say for certain people, but it's the word who, zay, like the word say, and fa. I would like to introduce myself first before I start anything. I am originally from Pakistan. That's where my parents are from. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. I went to high school there. I pretty much lived there my whole life up until the age of 17. When I hit the age of 17, I decided that I wanted to do something bigger with my life. And so instead of taking the traditional route, which is college, and then for me, it was eventually going to be law school or medical school, I decided that I wanted to pursue religion. And so I traveled to, first and foremost, California. I spent about a semester there studying. And then after that, I was accepted to go study in Medina, Saudi Arabia, which is the second, or you could say the first birthplace of Islam in the modern context. And we're going to talk about what Islam is today as well. But that's pretty much a little bit about who I am. And inshallah, I will introduce myself a little bit more as the presentation goes on. But I'm going to be doing it in a PowerPoint form so that people can follow along, and that it's, if you're taking notes, if you have any questions, it's easier to write down your questions when there's a visual aid for it. So again, like I said, my name is Huzaifa. I was born in Karachi. I grew up in St. Louis. I've been in America since I was 6 months old. I attended Parkway West, which is a local public high school over there. I graduated in 3 years. Originally, I wanted to go to law school. I was in California for a little while. And then eventually God had another plan for me, and I ended up going to live in the desert, and I studied Islam for about 6 years. I studied Islamic law in particular, and obviously subjects under that, like theology, like history, like philosophy, like logic, and so on and so forth. After I graduated, I came back to America, and like 3 days after my graduation, I moved to Greenville, South Carolina, and I've been serving here in the Greenville community since January 1st of 2021. And this is my second year, obviously. The reason why I mention all of this is so that you know that I'm not somebody that's just, a regular person representing Islam, but I'm actually qualified to talk about it in the first place. So any types of questions, concerns that you have, you're more than welcome to ask. And like I said, all questions are allowed. Don't shy away to ask. And I brought this quote of our Prophet, which is, indeed, all actions are defined by their intentions. And so our intentions, particularly my intentions, are to learn from one another, to grow in love, respect, tolerance, and mutual harmony, right? And so if you have any questions, any concerns, anything that's on your mind, or you feel like you've never gotten an adequate answer for, feel free to ask, right? And again, as I present the views of Islam, I'm not trying to disrespect anybody. I'm not trying to look down upon anybody. It's just for learning to grow in these intentions that I spoke about just a few seconds ago. Okay, so the first question is, what is Islam? This is a question that many people, if you ask them, they might say, well, Islam is the religion of the Arabs. Islam is a religion that originated in the Middle East. Islam is something that goes against the West. Islam is, whatever. People have different definitions for it. But what is Islam's own definition of itself? Well, as Muslims, we have one definition, and it's an agreed upon definition by a majority of Muslims, which is Islam means submission. Who are we submitting to? You're submitting to God, right? And so there's a technical definition that's brought up here, which is the submission of the mind, the heart, and the limbs to the will of the divine, i.e., God, based off of the revelations of God to his chosen prophets, starting with Adam and ending with our beloved prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And so every prophet in the chain from Adam, Moses, Jesus, Noah, pretty much every biblical prophet that you can think of, Muslims already believe in, right? And we believe that these are the carriers or the people that came with the message in order for human beings to connect back to the submission of God, right? And so this is what Islam is. It's submission of the three main parts of a human being to the will of God. And so the one who believes in Islam and the one who practices Islam is called a Muslim, meaning one who submits. That's what the word is. It just means one who submits to the will of God. And why is he submitting to the will of God? Because he's pushing away his desires and he's submitting to something that is greater than himself or herself. And so what is the central creed? Like, what makes a Muslim a Muslim? So the central creed or the central belief of the Muslims is known as Shahada. And Shahada, I think there's somebody waiting in the waiting room. The Shahada is a testimony of faith, something that somebody believes in. And so for Muslims, the testimony of faith is that there is no deity worthy of worship except the Lord himself. We use the word Allah, which means the Lord himself, and that Muhammad is his final messenger. And within this creed, you're going to notice a few things. Number one is that there is no deity worthy of worship. There is a complete denial of everything that anybody else worships. And then there's an affirmation, which is the affirmation of the Lord himself. So we negate everything. If you're worshiping idols, you're worshiping stones, you're worshiping rocks, another human being, whatever it is, all of these are denied. And the only thing that's accepted is God himself as the one that's worthy of worship. And then Muhammad is his final messenger. A key thing to notice in the second part of the creed is that we use the word final messenger. And so this denotes that there were previous messengers before him. There was Jesus, there was Moses, and we believe in all of those things. In fact, you aren't a Muslim unless you believe in all of the previous prophets as well. So this is what Islam is in a nutshell. A very simple theology, very simple idea, not very complicated, something that many people around the world accept and practice today. So some statistics about Muslims in the present day era. There are about 1.8 billion Muslims all across the world. This is about 24% of the world, meaning 1/4 of the world, a quarter of the world is Muslims. Muslims, they come in all shapes, all sizes, all colors. They speak all different languages. In fact, the biggest population of Muslims in the world are not Arabs, as stereotypically thought, but in fact, they're Indonesians, right? And again, Indonesians are people of Asian descent. They're not from the Middle East. And so these are the biggest population of Muslims in the world. Being Muslim, it isn't defined by the color of your skin or the language of your tongue or even the ethnic group you come from or the place that you're born at. All of it has to do with your heart, your mind, your soul when it comes to submitting to God. So you can be an American-born Muslim, you can be a Pakistani-born Muslim, you can be a Croatian Muslim, you can be a Turkish Muslim, you could be any type of Muslim, right? Because it's a universal religion similar to that of Christianity. So Muslims in America, that's more of our focus now. Muslims in America, there's about 75% of adults that are living in America have been Muslim before 2000, right? And what are the demographics? About 30% of them describe themselves as white, And that includes a lot of Arabs, because on the consensus, there's not really a selection for Arabs. So many of them describe themselves as white, especially if they're from the Levantine region, which is present-day Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and so on and so forth. 23% as Black African Americans or from Africa, 21% as Asians, that could span many countries, 6% as Hispanic, and 19% as other or mixed race. There are about 3.45 million Muslims in the United States. That makes up maybe roughly 1%, not a lot, right? But it's still an adequate number from the 300 million people that live in the United States of America. And so this is some statistics about Muslims. Now that we've understood what Islam is, we've understood a little bit about Muslims in the present day, in the current era, in the world, what they're doing. What is Islam? Like, where did it start? Like, how did it come about? Many people have the assumption that Islam is started in the Middle East. It started in Arabia. It started 14 centuries ago. And to a certain degree, that's true. However, as a Muslim, we believe that the story of Islam started way before that. In fact, we say that Islam started before the creation of the heavens and the earth, before even the word Islam itself, even before the word Christianity or Judaism or Hinduism, any of these isms, right? The reality is that we say that it started before all of this, before the creation of the heavens and earth. What does this mean? Well, in our tradition, we have a narration which talks about how God, he created every human soul, and he gathered every human soul, you and me and everybody in between, our ancestors and those that will come way after us. He gathered every single human being in a place we call Alimul Arwah, or the abode of souls, or the world of souls. He gathered them before him, and he asked them one simple question. In Arabic, we say, Alastu bi rabbikum, am I not your Lord? And at that moment, all of God's creation, every single human being that's been endowed with the intellectual capacity of answering a question, responds by saying, yes, we bear witness. We call this answer the covenant. It was at that moment when God asked that question and human beings respond in their soul form that they sealed a covenant or a deal with God. What is that deal? It's a moral responsibility to acknowledge God in this life through his unity in his lordship. There is no God but God. There is nobody worthy of worship except God. Through his worship, right? We worship him alone. And through his unique names and attributes, meaning nothing is like God. Nothing that we can imagine even comes close to what God is, right? And so this was the covenant that originally happened. And so we say that this is the beginning of Islam for the world, right? Because it's the first time human beings submitted to the will of the divine. Then the next story which comes up is the story of Adam. And many of us, we've heard the story of Adam. Many of us, especially those of a Judeo-Christian and Islamic background, have heard this story countless times, right? But there are key differences in the narrative for the Muslims. I'm not going to speak about the biblical or the Judeo-Christian differences, but I'm going to speak about how Islam views it. Obviously, because I'm not authorized and I don't feel like I am able to speak about the beliefs of another person. And in fact, if somebody would like to share at the end of the program, they can talk about the key differences as well. But what are the key differences? So we believe that God, first and foremost, he created Adam. At the moment of the creation of Adam, God, he commanded the angels of heaven to bow down to Adam. He commanded the angels of heaven to bow down to Adam. And amongst those angels, there was one whose name was Lucifer. And Lucifer, for us as Muslims, is not an angel. We believe that he is a creature made out of fire, what we call a jinn. We believe that God created three creatures, the human being, the angel, and the jinn. The jinn is not a genie, but it is a creature out of fire, similar to a human being, meaning it has free will, it has the choice to do right or wrong. And at that time, Lucifer was a righteous servant of God. In fact, they say that the creation of the earth came before the creation of Adam, and Lucifer actually worshipped on every single spot on earth. However, when Adam was created, God commanded the angels and he commanded Lucifer to bow down to Adam out of respect. And the angels, obviously having no free will, did so. But Lucifer, he said, no, I'm not going to bow down to a creature that is less than me. I am made out of fire. He's made out of clay. I can burn him. And so God, he questioned Lucifer and he said that, are you disobeying my order because of your arrogance? And Lucifer said that, why should I worship? Like, why should I bow my head down to him out of respect? Right? He's less than me. Right? And so at this moment, God, he cast Lucifer into hell. And Lucifer at that moment, he said that, give me respite, meaning give me time till the day of judgment. What is that respite for? He said that I will misguide the children of Adam till the end of time. And so that's where the concept of devil's whisper comes from. The fact that he said that his end all mission is to misguide humanity and the children of Adam. And lo and behold, the first person that he starts with is Adam. And so after God creates Adam, he eventually creates his wife, Eve, or Hawa for us as Muslims. And after he creates them, he commands them not to eat from a specific tree. We don't know whether it was an apple tree, as is commonly thought, but he tells them not to eat from a specific tree. Eventually, they do, right? At the whispers and the behest of the devil. We don't necessarily blame Eve. We say that it was something that both of them did together. And so after that moment, what ends up happening is that God catches them. And God says, didn't I tell you not to eat from this tree? And at that moment, Adam and Eve, they realize their mistake. They're hiding from God behind a bush. And eventually they seek the forgiveness of God. In fact, the Quran, it mentions how they turned back to God and they sought his forgiveness. And eventually God forgave them. And then God placed them on earth. And now this is the final and last difference. Many people assume that God created Adam and Eve for heaven and then he pushed them out of heaven. Or he created them for the Garden of Eden and then he took them out of the Garden of Eden. We believe as Muslims that God, even from the beginning of his creation, had the intention of creating a viceroy or a representative on earth. And this is proven through the verse in the chapter of the cow in the Quran, in which God, he says to the angels, I am going to create a viceroy upon earth. And the angels, they responded, are you going to create another creature like the jinn kind that will spread corruption and mischief on earth? God responded and said, I know that which you do not know. And then he called Adam and he said that, Adam, tell us the names of these things. So Adam starts pointing at trees and he starts pointing at bushes and all of these different things and naming all of these things. And then God, he turns to the angels. And at that moment, the angels understood that the thing that makes human beings special is their ability to learn, their ability for knowledge, their ability to acquire, to improve. And when there's the ability of knowledge, there's always the ability of choosing right. And there's always the ability of choosing wrong. And so that's what makes the human being special. But at the end of all of this, the reason why I mentioned all of this is to show you that there are key differences in the narratives for Muslims. And that's one of the reasons why the Quran came as well. But more importantly, to tell us that God did forgive Adam and that God also mentioned that none should inherit the sin of another. If I hit somebody, it doesn't mean that I should be that somebody else should be punished for my crime or for my sin. And that's the key difference for us as Muslims. And so this is the verse right here. Then Adam received some words from the Lord and he accepted his repentance. He is the ever relenting. He is the Lord. He is the most merciful. So now that goes to the beginning of Islam when it really started. But then, okay, well, what about Muhammad? Where does he fit in all of this? Why did he come? Why a new prophet? You said that you believe in Moses, that you believe in Noah, that you believe in Jesus, and you clearly believe in Adam. and all the other prophets, but why do you need Muhammad? And so we say Muhammad he's just a prophet. He follows the Islam or the submission of all of the other prophets. He follows the way of Adam, the way of Noah, the way of Moses, the way of Jesus, and so on and so forth, right? He didn't come with a new creed per se. He literally came to say that worship God alone and, submit your will to God. Sacrifice your desires at the altar of God, right? And so it was an affirmation of the previous creeds. And so we follow him because we as Muslims, we believe he is the last and the final prophet of God, right? Whose message was not altered by the hands of corrupt men or by the annals of history. And so that's our biggest contention with other faith groups, is that we believe that yes, Jesus was a prophet. Yes, Moses was a prophet. But because of the passage of time, because of the manuscripts being written so late, because of the switches on language and so on and so forth, and obviously the corruption of men, a lot of these messages were altered, right? And so we say that Muhammad, he came back to bring people back to the original submission of Adam, Noah, Moses, and Jesus. That which is simple, that which is pure, and that which connects human beings back to God without any middleman. Right? So again, he came to perfect the message of the previous ones and complete them. The same exact essential truths. His message is universal. In fact, the Quran, it says, we have not sent you except as a mercy to mankind. Not as a mercy to the Arabs, not as a mercy to the people of the Middle East, but as a mercy to mankind. So it's literally for all people, right? So whereas other prophets had specific people like Moses, Muhammad was the prophet of all people, right? Muhammad was the prophet of all people, right? And so one of the speakers that I generally listen to, he said that Islam is the Judaism of the Gentiles, right? So again, it's a religion for all people. So what exactly is Islam? Okay, well, I understand why there's one God. I understand where the story starts, and I understand why Muhammad plays a role in all of this. But what exactly does Islam actually have inside of it? What makes up Islam? And so Islam, like I said, it has the submission of the limbs, the mind, and the heart. Why did I mention these three things? Because they reflect three dimensions of our faith. What are those three dimensions? Practice, faith, and spirituality. What is practice? Practice means fulfilling the rituals, fulfilling the rites, praying, and so on and so forth. These are things that Muslims do on a habitual basis. They're action-led, right? And then there's faith, which is the submission of the mind, right? Theology, what we believe in, what we know to be true of God, what we know to be rationally proven of God, and so on and so forth. And then spirituality, like the submission of the heart, purifying the heart of jealousy, of hate, of pride, of anger, of lust, and all of the desires that could be seen as deadly sins, right? And so each of our different systems, our limbs, our mind, our heart, serve a different purpose. And that's what makes Islam a holistic religion. It's not a religion that says, hey, just do this, or hey, just believe this and that's enough. But it's about bringing practice, faith, and spirituality all together. And so for Muslims, we call Islam the middle road, right? It merges the law, the conformity of the Torah, all of the specific laws that come in the Torah, and the spirituality and the higher calling of the Gospels of Jesus, of course, right? And so that's why we call it the middle road, because there are rules to Islam, but at the same time, there's a deeper meaning behind all of it, right? And so going to each of the dimensions, we're going to talk about each dimension, and then we're going to finish off. So what is the first dimension? The first dimension is practice. What do Muslims actually practice with their limbs? What do they actually do, right? So the first is that they profess the testimony of faith. These are known as the 5 pillars of Islam, right? Number 1, they profess the testimony of faith, which is that there is no deity worthy of worship besides Allah, which is the Lord, and Muhammad is his final messenger. The second thing is that Muslims pray 5 times a day. And you might think, gosh, that's a lot. Like, why would somebody have to pray 5 times a day? Isn't one time just enough? Right? But the reason is because as human beings, we're forgetful. We forget God. Sometimes we're sinning and we forget God. Sometimes we're going through a hard time and we forget God. Whatever it is. So Islam, it puts in a system in place that allows a human being to disconnect from the harshness and the difficulties of life and connect to something bigger than themselves. And that's obviously communion with God 5 times a day, right? And it doesn't take very long. It takes about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, depending on the person. Sometimes if it's a little kid, maybe even 5 minutes, right? So again, it just depends on the person. The third thing is alms. Alms is a funny word, but alms literally just means obligatory charity. What is an obligatory charity? It means that those Muslims that are well off give about 2.5% of their wealth to the poor and to the needy and for those that need it, right? And so this is an integral part of our religion, right? For those that are able to fulfill it. The number 4 is fasting in the holy month of Ramadan. That's from dawn till sunset. And that's for those, again, that are able, they're healthy, they can do it, right? Then there's pilgrimage to Mecca once in a lifetime if you are financially and physically able, right? If you're not financially and physically able, you're not required to do this. A question that a lot of people ask me is that, okay, well, you said pilgrimage to Mecca. What about Medina? Well, yes, you can go to Medina, but it's not required. Another place is Jerusalem. You can go to Jerusalem as well. We have 3 main holy cities. We have Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem. Mecca being special because that's where Adam and Abraham built the original house of God. And then obviously Muhammad, he was born in that city. We believe Medina is special because that's where Muhammad escaped persecution and that's where he's buried. And we believe Jerusalem is special because it's the abode of hundreds of thousands of prophets that came before, including Moses, including Jesus, of course, peace be upon them all. And so these are the 5 main pillars of Islam. And if you go to Google, you can easily search what these are and you can read about them. So if you type in 5 pillars of Islam, this will be the first search that you'll find. So you might wonder, okay, well, now that we've talked a little bit about the dimensions of practice, right? Where do you get all of this information from? Where is all of this coming from? How do you know what you're saying is the truth? Where is your revelational knowledge coming from? And so we have a holy book. It's called the Quran. The Quran literally translates to the oft recited, meaning something that's constantly recited. And so you'll find Muslims that will read the Quran from cover to cover multiple times before they die. You'll find Muslims across the world that have actually memorized the Quran in its totality from cover to cover, even like kids that are 4 years old. It's relatively smaller than the other religious scriptures. It's about 600 pages, and you can even find like 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds that have memorized the thing in totality, even 70-year-olds as well. And so that's our holy book. What's inside of it? You might ask, well, the Quran, it has the purpose of our life. It tells us what we're here for. It answers the question of why, right? Because for a lot of people, the main purpose of religion is why. And so that's what the Quran does. It answers the why for people. What is the why? Number 1, it's servitude to God, right? You were created to serve God. You were created to obey God, right? And it's like, for example, the toy maker, he makes his invention, or the inventor, he makes his invention to fulfill a purpose. And in the same exact way, anybody that believes in God can understand that this isn't a negative thing, but it's just a realistic thing, right? And the second purpose of life is stewardship. God, he told the angels that I'm going to create a viceroy, a representative on earth who serves the people of earth. And so Muslims are required to serve other people, whether by teaching them about faith, whether by being their doctors, whether by helping build civilization structures, so on and so forth. This is the second thing, to maintain the earth, climate control, whatever it is, right? All of this falls under this second category. The third thing is societal welfare, making sure that the poor are taken care of, making sure that the widows are taken care of, making sure that the orphans are taken care of, making sure that the oppressed are defended, right? And so on and so forth. And the final purpose of life is the afterlife, right? Because not everybody on this world is going to be perfect. There are going to be people that are evil. There are going to be people that hurt others. There are going to be people that kill and murder in the name of money and so on and so forth. And so there has to be an accountability. There has to be a day of judgment. There has to be recompense. There has to be a reason for why evil exists on this earth. And again, all of these answers are questions that are answered by the Quran through the concept of the afterlife. No oppressor will get away. No person that hurt another person will get away, because there will be accountability in the court of God, and God is most just. No matter what a person, whatever happens in a court in this world, it can never be as equally just as God. And I can give you a basic example. A person kills one person, he goes to jail for his whole life. A person kills 100 people, he goes to jail for his whole life. What's the difference in the punishment? It's about the same exact thing, but it's only God that can actually establish true justice, and that happens in the hereafter. And so these are the four purposes of life: serving God, serving the earth, and serving the people of the earth, and obviously the hereafter. And so these purposes have come in all of the previous books as well, right? So we believe in all of the previous books. We believe in all of the previous prophets, right? And we believe that there were 124,000 prophets. And you might wonder, wow, that's a huge number. Why would you need that many prophets? Because human beings have the tendency to forget, right? Today we're on this trend, tomorrow we're on that trend, right? Today we're good, tomorrow we're bad. We need reminders as human beings. We forget, we make mistakes, sometimes we're ignorant, so on and so forth. Sometimes through time, people forget values. And so God would send prophets time and time again to different locations across the earth in order for people to connect back to God and to be reminded of their purposes of life. And so for us as Muslims, we don't know the name of all 124,000. We know the name of about 25 prophets, and many of these prophets are included in the Bible. Only 4 of them are not included in the Bible explicitly. What are their names? There's Adam, there's Moses, there's Jesus, there's Noah, there's Zechariah, there's Jonah, there's Jacob, there's Isaac, there's Ishmael. All of these are prophets that we believe are prophets of Islam. And again, if you want to know all of the names, if you go on Google, you can type in 25 prophets of Islam, and you'll find all of the names, and you can, find books and articles and manuscripts about their actual stories if you want to go even deeper, right? And so our holy book is the Quran, which has been protected and preserved since the time of the Prophet. We believe in the Torah, the Gospels, the scriptures of Abraham, the book of David, which is the Psalms. However, we believe that the hands of men have corrupted those books in part. Thus, the advent of the Prophet was necessary to correct the narrative, and sometimes even to correct the narratives on the stories of the prophets themselves. What are the themes of the Quran? What does it actually contain? Well, it contains 3 main things. It contains creed, it contains stories of the prophets and their people, and it contains laws. What is creed? Like, what do Muslims actually believe, right? Responding to the various groups of people that have come throughout the ages who either denied God or denied a pure belief in him, meaning they were either polytheists, idol worshippers, so on and so forth. What do Muslims believe and how to respond to those people? That's included in the Quran. Then the stories of their prophets and their people, right? So the story of Moses is actually the most mentioned story in the Quran. The name Muhammad appears about 3 to 4 times in the Quran with different etymologies, but the name Moses appears the most. And after that, the name Mary appears. Then the name Jesus appears. Muhammad is the least mentioned of the prophets actually in the Quran. Then the third thing is that the laws pertaining to ritual worship, family law, which includes marriage, divorce, so on and so forth, penal code, punishments, business law, and so on and so forth. So these are the major themes of the Quran. But now you might be like, okay, well, now we understand that the Muslims believe in the Quran. The Quran includes all of these kinds of things, but who actually interprets the Quran, whose understanding of the Quran is the right understanding. Because in America, you have your moderate Muslim neighbors, you have your Muslim friends, you have people that you go to college and university, and then you have crazy people, you know, that might be in certain parts of the world like ISIS, that also claim to believe in the same exact Quran that my friends believe in. So the question is, it comes down to who's interpreting the Quran, who has the right to actually interpret the Quran, what is the right way to interpret the Quran, right? And so we say that the Quran, first and foremost, is understood by the Prophet, right? And secondly, by his companions, right? Companions that are students of the Prophet. And then thirdly, the rightly guided scholars. The rightly guided scholars have a tradition that has continued from the time of the companions all the way back to the Prophet. And so, again, there's a tradition that has to be understood. It's not by random people, not some Joe sitting on the street, not some Muhammad sitting on the street, not some, dude sitting on the street. It's definitely not by some angry men who claim to be Muslim or claim Islam and terrorize others in the name of it. These people are not the interpreters of the Quran. The Quran has a tradition, and the Quran has proper people to interpret it, to teach it, and so on and so forth, right? And so again, this is what the Quran ultimately is, because you can take any book out of context. If you take the Bible out of context, you'll come out with weird conclusions. If you take the Quran out of context, same thing. The Torah out of context, same thing. The Vedas out of context, same thing. And so that's why you need trained people, those that have actually studied it from a traditional lens, to actually explain what it actually means, right? And so this is an extra slide. I usually do this for students of art, but I'm going to skip this. I wanted to show you some pictures of some mosques, because again, it's the tour of Islam. And so one of the things that exemplifies Islam is art. And so for those of you that possibly may have or will in the future visit a Muslim country, you'll see some of these things. This right here is a minaret. It's similar to a bell tower. It's the way that Muslims, they call their call to prayer. You might not find very many of these in the United States of America, because in most places, you're not really allowed to call the call of prayer on loudspeaker. There are certain places like Dearborn, Michigan, Chicago, certain times of the year that it's allowed in certain cities, but this is where the Muslims will call their call to prayer. If they don't call it from this place, they call it from inside the building with an indoor speaker system. So the place where Muslims worship is called a masjid. In English, it's called a mosque. Masjid literally means a place where somebody bows their head. And so this image that you see right here, this is the mosque that I grew up in. It's in St. Louis. It's a multi-million-dollar project. There's a library to it, a school to it, a gym to it, a prayer area, cafeteria, so on and so forth, different things, meeting area, for a conference room and stuff like that. So this is the mosque that I grew up in. And like this, there are mosques all around the world. They look different based off of where you are. So this is a mosque here right in the United States of America. This right here is a mosque in Spain. This is currently a cathedral, right? But it was originally a mosque. It was known as the Cordoba Mosque. And so you can see the Islamic art. One of the things that you'll see in Islamic art is arches, right? And so you can see those arches, very beautifully done. That's been preserved for hundreds of years. This is the Blue Mosque in Turkey, where Brother Akif is from. You can see the art, the intricate art. Muslims, we don't draw pictures and images of other people, and so we had to get good at other forms of art, and this would be an example right here. This is the Umayyad Mosque, which is in present-day Syria. Unfortunately, a lot of it doesn't look like this anymore. It was destroyed, a lot of it. And so these are some of the things that go into that. And I just wanted to finish off. I don't know. I'll stop right here. But there's a video that maybe Christina can send people about different mosques around the world. If we have time, we can view it. It's only a minute or two long. I don't know if Christina wants me to show the video or not.
I think you could if you'd like to.
Okay.
I think you showed this before. I can't remember.
Yeah, I've shown it before. I showed it
Yeah,
last year.
so I think, yeah, if you could go ahead, because I remember it was really very interesting.
Okay, so let me share the sound first.
I find it interesting that a lot of us, when we travel to Muslim majority countries, we love hearing the sounds of call to prayer, but yeah, you can't hear that here in this country. It's like, we
Yeah.
don't like that.
Yeah, I
But
mean, it would be good if like certain cities allowed, at least because there are 5 prayers, if they allowed it for at least one, it would, it would create questions. It would actually, increase tolerance and stuff like that. But
yeah,
I
it's just
mean,
really cool.
yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah. So I'm gonna show you a video right now. There is some Islamic, what we call a musical background to it. So if it bothers you, you can mute it. But these are just some images of mosques around the world. And you're probably wondering, why is he showing unusual mosques? It's just to show you that there are mosques around the world and they don't all look the same. They look different.
ضاقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب العباد وانتشت روحي وصار الدمع يجري رددت يا رب العباد وانتشت روحي وصار الدمع يجري يا إلهي خذ بقلبي للرشاد أشرقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب العباد وانتشت روحي وصار الدمع يجري يا إلهي خذ بقلبي للرشاد أشرقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب العباد وانتشت روحي وصار الدمع يجري يا إلهي خذ بقلبي للرشاد في سكون الليل أدعو في سجودي والدجى حولي سواد في سوادي يا رؤوفا يا رحيما يا حليما يا كريما ما لفضلك من نفادي يا سميعا يا مجيبا يا عظيما اهدني يا خالق السبع الشهاد أشرقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب العباد وانتشت روحي وصار الدمع يجري يا إلهي خذ بقلبي للرشاد أشرقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب العباد وانتشت روحي وصار الدمع يجري يا إلهي خذ بقلبي للرشاد للهدى والحق وفقني إلهي فعلى توفيقك اليوم اعتمادي يا إله الكون يا عوني
So that was the end of the video.
Thank
As
you.
you can see, like mosques come in all shapes and all sizes, just like Muslims come in all shapes and sizes from all cultures, all languages, all backgrounds. And as you can see, some mosques are very simple. Again, like I said, a mosque is a place where somebody bows their head down. And so technically, as Muslims, we say the whole world, as long as the ground that you're praying in is pure, as a mosque for a Muslim. So
Thank you very much for sharing that with us. I have a couple of questions that were put in the chat that I'm going to ask. I thought that underwater mosque was quite interesting. I guess I can imagine if you're out diving and it's prayer time, you can't come up and go. So I'm like, it's right there. I mean, that's kind of interesting.
I think certain ones are more like for like people to have different experiences of praying. Yeah.
I can imagine. I mean, I would want to travel and have different experiences of praying in different places. I did watch a film and I shared it on our Atlantic Institute Facebook page before about the Mud and Sticks Mosque.
Oh.
And it was like a video of how the whole town comes together once a year and how they do all the mud repair and all that stuff. And hold on one second for me. Okay, so one of the questions that we had is, so is there no such thing as original sin in Islam?
So like I said, there's no original sin because we believe that Adam, after making the mistake that he made, he sought the forgiveness of God and God forgave him. And so we don't believe that anybody is responsible for the mistake or sin of another. It's like, for example, if I were to hurt somebody, if I were to hit somebody, if I were to kill somebody on the street, and the police came to my house and said that, hey, you did this, we found the murder weapon on you, we have all the proof against you, and you say, well, my brother is willing to take the fall for it because, you know, he's willing to do it. The police at that moment, they're just going to look at me like, what are you talking about? You're responsible for your own life, right? And so again, as Muslims, we say that at that original onslaught or the original beginning, God forgave Adam, and so nobody is responsible for anyone else.
Okay. Then the other question that Carol Black asked was, could you explain the difference between Sunni, Shia, and Sufi?
Okay, so that's a very big question. That's like more of a class question that could take about like 16 weeks to explain. But in short, the original difference of opinion that happened between Sunnis and Shias is political based. However, due to an original political split, and this is again all after the time of the Prophet. This has to do with Islamic history, not necessarily Islam itself, right? And so that's what a lot of people confuse. It has to do with geopolitical realities. But what ends up happening over time is that because the original Shia movement began in Persia and parts of Iraq and Iran today, which Iraq and Iran were originally the lands of the Zoroastrians and of different faith groups. It's known as the land of 1,000 religions. And India obviously is known as the land of 3,000 religions. But Persia at that time was known as the land of 1,000 religions. So a lot of concepts that people had pre-Islam mixed into the Islam of that region. And so that's where Shiism, like the actual theological group of Shiism, was born. And so Sunnis and Shias, we disagree on certain theological issues. Practical issues, there's not many differences, to be honest, but theological issues, we do have differences. Now, in the modern day era where you find Sunnis and Shias fighting, that's not necessarily because of religion or because of beliefs. It's more because of political tensions and geopolitical tensions in the regions, and, you know, imperialists coming and causing fights between groups of people. As for the Sufis are just a strand of Muslims that are more inaptly spiritually oriented. They care more for the inner aspects of the world. And again, Sufis come in all different shapes and sizes. And so to generalize any of these groups would be silly, to be frank. But those are just the key differences, right?
Thank you. Stephen was asking if Allah has a human gender.
Allah does not have a gender. So again, you might wonder when reading the Quran why it says he, right? So this is a question that a lot of young Muslims even have, and especially girls, because they're like, why is God a he? The reason why is because when you're talking about a being or an essence, you have to denote a way to describe him. And so linguistically, right, you know, use the word he, right? And so even in the Bible, the word he is used. But if you ask any Christian, you ask him, does God have a gender? They're going to say technically no, right? And so it's just because of linguistic or grammatical reasons why the word he is used over she. But again, we don't say God is a he, we don't say God is a she in the way that you and me perceive it. Because if you say God is a he, then he has certain limitations, and then he's not God anymore. If you say God is a she, then God also has certain limitations. But again, like I said, it's for linguistic purposes. He has no biological gender.
Okay, thank you. And then Julie was wondering if you work out of the mosque on Wade-Hampton Boulevard in Greenville, South Carolina.
Yes, I lead some prayers there sometimes.
Okay. And then do you also lead out of the Islamic Center?
And Clement, yes, both. Yeah, we
You
do
say-
both.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have any other questions? I figure I will ask if anybody else has any questions or comments. Keith?
Krishna, I might have a comment maybe about the question of if God has a gender. Imam, he is humble. Thank you, Huzaifa. You did an excellent job with your wonderful presentation. He is also a Hafiz, which a person that memorizes the Quran by heart from cover to cover. So maybe, Huzaifa, you can kind of describe the Surah Al-Ikhlas, which is beautifully describes the nature of God, which also tells about, there's no gender of God.
Yeah.
That's that.
So, Jazakumullah khair, Brother Akif. So there is a chapter, actually one of the shortest chapters in the Quran. And what's interesting about this chapter is the fact that it summarizes what a Muslim believes, literally in 3 verses. All of our theology of God is based off of 3 main verses. And so these 3 verses, they begin with God saying, say, meaning God is telling Muhammad, say, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Say that indeed Allah is one, right? That He is one, right? And this one is a unique one, meaning nothing is like it, right? So when you say, like, for example, I have these deck of cards in my hand, right? And I say, pick one card. This one card isn't necessarily unique. You might find another card like it. But when you say one, when it comes to God, it means that He is unique. Then the second thing is Allahu Samad, which is God is the one who is depended upon and not the one that depends on others. Meaning God, He doesn't eat, He doesn't drink, He doesn't sleep, He doesn't need children, right? He doesn't need anything else. In fact, everything else needs Him. He is the existent and everything else depends on Him to exist, right? Then the 3rd verse is Lam yalid wa lam yulad. He was neither born nor will he have children, nor will anybody come out of him, right? And so he's not a father and he's not a son, right? He is before all of this. He's before time. He's before creation, right? And then the last verse is, which is the nail in the coffin, which is وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ, which is, and to God there is no partner, meaning nothing is like Him, right? Nothing is like Him, right? So anything that you and me can perceive, male, female, gender role, like all of these things, they apply to us because God created it so, but they don't apply to God. Because if God is like us, if He eats, if He sleeps, if He drinks, if He forgets, if he feels sad, all of these things are human emotions. And thus, at a certain degree, they could be perceived as weaknesses, right? And so God doesn't have those deficiencies like you and me might have. And so this is in 3 short verses. It's literally like 2 lines long. In English, it's like one line. And so within it, one line, we have so many theological points that come out. And it's the 112th chapter of the Quran. So if you go and type 112th chapter of the Quran, you'll find these 3 verses. And so
Thank you. Julie, just so you know, Julie said, fantastic presentation. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to learn from you.
my pleasure.
Carol has to leave at 8. She has another appointment on Zoom, but she said, thank you for being open to questions. One other question was asked from Teresa. She said, what's involved in a pilgrimage?
So the pilgrimage is pretty much a journey of a Muslim from wherever they're at in the world to Mecca. Once they reach Mecca, they do certain practices, which are practices done by Abraham and his son Ishmael. One of those practices is circumambulating or going around the structure known as the Kaaba. It's like a black looking cube, right? And then another practice is going between 2 mounts. We believe that the wife of Abraham, the second wife of Abraham, which was Hagar, she ran between those 2 mounts or whatever, and looking for water after Abraham was commanded to leave her in the desert and to return back to Sarah. And his other son, right? Isaac. And so when that happened, she ran back and forth, and eventually an angel came down to the foot of Ishmael. He hit his wings at that spot. That angel is as the angel Gabriel or whatever. He hit his wing on that spot, and water started gushing. And that water, what we call today, is called Zamzam, and it still exists to this very day. It was it's something that many pilgrims, they go and they try to bring back water. Like, it's like what we would call holy water, sort of, but it's not because somebody blessed it. It's because it has a historic beginning to it, right? And because it's like, it took care of Hagar, and it took care of Ishmael when nobody was there to take care of them. So it's an example of God taking care of his people, right? And then another few things is that you go and you pelt, like, representative, like towers, which we say they represent the devil. You go to a certain mount where you pray to God. Everybody is dressed in white. Everybody is dressed the same. You're black, you're white, you're red, you're yellow, you're rich, you're poor, you're old, you're young. It doesn't matter. Everybody's on the mount together, and they're praying to God, and they're asking God for forgiveness. And this is like a representation for Muslims of the Day of Judgment, right? So they feel like, hey, doesn't matter who I am, we're all in this together. And so for any of you that might have read the book by Malcolm X, he actually, when he talks about the Hajj in his book, this is the climax for him of the Hajj, where he sees people from all over the world, people that don't even speak the same languages, eating food together from the same exact plate, wearing the same exact clothes, and just going towards the same direction in life, right? And so that's what the pilgrimage is a representation of.
I was going to say, I think the History Channel or a couple of other channels, for those of you that are interested, they have, you can type that in the search, and they have a video about what the pilgrimage is to Hajj. We've done conversations on that in the past, but I don't think we've done any over Zoom that have been recorded. I can't remember. And for some of you that would want to experience what Ramadan is or learn about that, we do host virtually online. We've hosted for the past couple of years Ramadans, so that you can understand what it is about. And then a lot of times, perhaps maybe by this next Ramadan season, we'll have some dinners in houses, or there's a great organization that on a virtual organization that actually connects you to where dinners are going on. So you can actually sign up for dinner at somebody's house. And I usually share that closer to Ramadan for those that are interested. All right, we have hit about an hour, and usually, yeah, and I keep putting here, the documentary for Hajj is called Inside Mecca. Sister Pam Smith said, thank you so much for a great overview of Islam.
My pleasure.
We've hit about an hour, and usually I like to keep it to an hour, but I just want to ask if anybody else has any other questions before we go ahead and wrap up. Excuse me. Our last tour will be Thursday at 11 o'clock in the morning. For those that are around at 11 o'clock in the morning and would like to see me from Anderson, is also in person. If you live close to Anderson or Greenville and want to travel over there, we're going to be visiting one of the church over in Anderson. It has quite a big labyrinth, and it's very interesting. There's a lot of history. And Susan just said the interesting PBS is Muslim road trips across America, Route 66, Chicago to LA. She also said, thank you for this presentation. All right, and so oh, there we go. All right, and so Imam Huzaifa, I would like to thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and sharing this with us. So we thank you very much for your time. And if everybody would like to unmute yourself and say good night or good evening and say thank you, you can.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank
Good
you
night,
very much.
everyone.
Very nice presentation.
Thank you so much. Are you okay with me?
All right, thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and end.
Okay.